Welcome to Night Lesson. Relax and learn along the way.
Intro: The long silence. Imagine the entire history of humanity, from the first stone tools to the present day, as a single 24-hour clock. The clock begins at midnight. For almost the entire day, for 23 hours and 59 minutes, from our modern perspective, almost nothing happens. The hands creep forward almost imperceptibly, driven by the slow, patient cycles of evolution and geological time. And then, in the last few seconds before the next midnight, everything changes in a breathtaking crescendo. We people of today, we live precisely in these last fleeting seconds. This journey we embark on tonight is about this incredible, almost uncanny acceleration. It is inspired by the great questions of science fiction, such as those we encounter in works like The Three-Body Problem, questions that force us to reflect on our own technological development, its speed, and our place in time. It is a story that leads us from the deepest, most silent past into a future that is approaching faster than we could ever have imagined. Let us journey together through the long silence. Listen to the quiet ticking of the clock across eons, to comprehend the loud crescendo of our present, and perhaps to catch a glimpse of what the next second holds for us. Chapter 1: The Dawn of Reason. From stone to metal, our clock begins its journey about 2.5 million years ago in the vast, sun-scorched savannas of Africa. An early human ancestor, perhaps a Homo habilis, the handyman, crouches on the bank of a dry riverbed. He picks up a stone, a simple pebble, but he sees more than just a stone. In his mind, an idea takes shape, one that goes beyond mere grasping. With another harder stone, he deliberately strikes off pieces, turns the pebble, examines the sharp edge, strikes again. Gradually, a hand axe emerges, a tool that fits his hand, an extension of his will. It is more than just a tool for cutting meat or breaking bones. It is the first spark of technology, an abstract thought given form, a plan transferred from the brain into the material world. It is proof that this early human no longer just accepts the world as it is, but is beginning to shape it to his needs. But now begins the great, the unimaginably long wait. The hands of our clock creep forward. A day on our clock corresponds to more than 100,000 years of real time. 1,000 years pass, 10,000, 100,000. The glaciers of the ice ages come and go, carving valleys into the landscape, trapping vast amounts of water and retreating again to raise sea levels. Entire species of animals, the woolly mammoth, the saber-toothed tiger, emerge, dominate the ice age landscape, and die out again. Yet the tool in the hands of our ancestors remains almost unchanged for over 1 million years. The hand axe slowly improves, becoming more symmetrical, the flaking technique more refined, but the basic principle remains the same. An idea that endures for 1 million years. The horizon of possibility remains the same for countless generations. The nights are pitch black, filled with the sounds of nature and the real dangers of the darkness. The world is static, the rhythm of life determined by the rising and setting of the sun, the change of seasons, the migration of herds. For most of our existence as a thinking species, it was a time of silence, a time of waiting for a spark that would ignite the world forever. We linger for a while in this deep time. Humans learn to control fire, not just to use it, but to create it themselves. This is a crucial step. Fire offers warmth, protection from predators, and allows for the cooking of food, which in turn provides more energy and allows the brain to develop further. The making of clothes from animal skins, the use of caves as shelters, all are slow but fundamental technological advances. It is a process of learning through trial and error over generations, a process as gradual as the erosion of a mountain. Homo sapiens emerges, spreads across the globe, and develops the first rudimentary art forms that adorn the caves of Lascaux and Altamira. Yet the tools remain largely made of stone, bone, and wood. Then, about 10,000 years ago, with the end of the last ice age, a new era begins, laying the foundation for settled life. Humans discover metals. First copper, which they find in its pure form and can shape by hammering. It is soft, but it is malleable and allows for more precise tools than stone. The Copper Age heralds the beginning of metallurgy, but the real leap comes with the Bronze Age, which begins about 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. The discovery that an alloy of copper and tin, bronze, is much harder, tougher, and more durable than pure copper revolutionizes tool and weapon making. This requires new skills and more complex processes. Mining, smelting in high-temperature furnaces, casting in molds. It leads to long-distance trade to obtain the necessary raw materials, especially tin, which is rare, and promotes the specialization of craftsmen. Kings and empires arise, consolidating their power through the control of bronze deposits and the production of weapons. The intervals between fundamental technological innovations begin to shorten. About 3,200 years ago, in the Near East, the next major step is taken, the Iron Age. Although iron is more difficult to work with than bronze, as it requires higher temperatures and more complex forging techniques, it is much more abundant. The technique of forging, the heating and shaping of iron, is a demanding art, but it democratizes metal tools. The farmer can now afford an iron plow, the soldier an iron sword. This leads to a further increase in agricultural productivity and military power, and the old bronze cities are overrun by new iron empires. Each of these material revolutions took centuries, even millennia, to become fully established. But compared to the Stone Age, where technology stood virtually still for millions of years, this was already an acceleration, a quiet premonition of what was yet to come. Chapter 2. The First Sparks, Agriculture, Wheel, and Writing. After hours and hours have passed on our clock, with humanity spread across the globe, and Homo sapiens having taken the stage, the next great revolution occurs around 2358. It is so profound that it changes human life forever and lays the foundation for all subsequent civilizations. About 12,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, humans learn not only to gather seeds from wild grasses but to deliberately place them in prepared soil and wait for their yield. Agriculture begins. It is not a sudden invention by a single genius, but a slow process of understanding, of observing cycles of growth and harvest, of the relationship between water, sun, and soil. It is a step from predator to creator, from nomad to settler. But the consequences are immense. For the first time, humans actively intervene in the cycles of nature to secure their future and produce a surplus of food. They are no longer just hunters and gatherers, dependent on what nature happens to offer. They become producers, shapers of their environment. They become sedentary. The nomadic groups that followed the herd settle down. Temporary camps become permanent settlements. Villages emerge, then the first cities like Jericho or Catalhoyuk, with houses of mud brick nestled closely together. With sedentarism come entirely new challenges and inventions. Surpluses must be stored, leading to the development of pottery. Ownership of land and harvest arises, and society begins to specialize. There are no longer just hunters, but also farmers, craftsmen who make tools, priests who pray to the gods for a good harvest, and soldiers who protect the supplies. Shortly thereafter, just a few seconds later on our clock, about 6,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, comes another invention as simple as it is brilliant. The wheel, first used probably as a potter's wheel to shape vessels more quickly and evenly. Its potential for transport is soon recognized. Suddenly, heavy loads can be moved, distances can be overcome more easily, and trade can be conducted over greater distances. Ideas, goods, and people begin to travel. The world begins to shrink, and cultures start to exchange and mix. At almost the same time, around 5,500 years ago, in Sumer and Egypt, perhaps the most important step for the future of the mind occurs. The invention of writing. An external memory for humanity is created. Knowledge, laws, epics, myths, and the accounting of granaries no longer need to be passed down orally from one person to the next, where they can fade, change, and eventually be lost. They can now be chiseled in stone, carved into clay tablets, or written on papyrus, and preserved almost without loss for generations. A single thought, a story, a discovery can now endure for centuries and be read by anyone who knows the code. The foundation for everything that follows is laid. The rhythm of progress becomes noticeably faster. The intervals between major revolutions shorten from hundreds of thousands of years to a few thousand. Civilizations rise, flourish, and fall, but accumulated knowledge grows slowly but steadily. The Library of Alexandria becomes a beacon of knowledge, yet it too is still an island in a sea of ignorance. Chapter 3. The Chain Reaction, Printing Press, Steam, and Electricity. We are now approaching the last minute on our clock. The great empires of antiquity have risen and vanished into the dust of time. The Roman Empire has left behind its roads and aqueducts. The Arab world has preserved and advanced the knowledge of the Greeks, and the Middle Ages, with its cathedrals and scholastic learning, are behind us. Yet progress, measured by the speed of change, remains linear for centuries, not exponential. It is not until around the year 1450, only about 20 seconds before midnight, that an invention is made in an inconspicuous workshop in Mainz that will trigger an unstoppable chain reaction. The printing press with movable type by Johannes Gutenberg. Before this, copying a book was the laborious work of months or even years, performed by a monk in the quiet seclusion of a scriptorium or a scribe in a workshop. A book was a rare, precious treasure, accessible only to the wealthiest elite and the clergy. With Gutenberg's press, this changes radically. A book can now be produced in hundreds or thousands of copies, and in just a few weeks. Knowledge that was previously the privilege of a few is democratized. The theses of Martin Luther, which spark a religious revolution, the writings of humanists like Erasmus of Rotterdam, the rediscovered works of ancient Greek philosophers and scientists, all spread like wildfire across the European continent. It is the beginning of an educational explosion, a period we call the Renaissance. The ability to read and write is no longer a privilege, but becomes a necessity for social advancement and participation in the new world of ideas. Every printed book, every new idea, every scientific treatise dramatically shortens the time to the next, because now minds can communicate across hundreds of miles, build upon the ideas of others, criticize them, and develop them further. The scientific revolution gains momentum. Nicolaus Copernicus places the sun at the center of the solar system. Galileo Galilei points the telescope to the heavens and discovers the moons of Jupiter, and Isaac Newton formulates the universal laws of gravity and motion, revealing the cosmos as a vast, precise clock. Only about 300 years after Gutenberg, around the year 1770, just a few seconds before midnight on our clock, James Watt perfects the steam engine. Human civilization, which for millennia was powered by the muscle of man and beast and the whims of wind and water, gets a new heart of iron and fire. The immense energy stored in coal over millions of years is unleashed. Factories spring up, their machines working day and night, producing goods in unprecedented quantity and speed. Railways traverse the lands at a speed previously unimaginable, shrinking the continents to a new scale. Steamships cross the oceans, independent of the winds. The world becomes smaller, faster, louder. Again, only about 100 years later, a blink of an eye on our clock, electricity is tamed. Men like Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, and Thomas Edison decipher its laws and make it usable. The world becomes bright at the push of a button. The night loses its final terror. The telegraph allows for real-time communication over thousands of miles. The second industrial revolution begins, driven by a clean, invisible force flowing through copper wires. The curve of progress is no longer a gentle slope. It begins to steepen, almost like a launching rocket. Chapter 4. The Yesterday of Tomorrow, when science fiction becomes the blueprint. Let us pause for a brief moment and take a detour into the world of imagination, which often serves as an astonishing blueprint for the future. As real technological development gained momentum, the human mind, in science fiction, had already begun to anticipate the next steps, sometimes with uncanny precision. It is as if the dreamers and storytellers were sensing and foreshadowing the world we are evolving into. Consider the television series Star Trek, which aired in the 1960s. When Captain Kirk stepped onto a strange planet or left the bridge of the Enterprise, the doors of the starship glided open before him as if by magic. For viewers at the time, this was futuristic magic, a symbol of an advanced world where technology seamlessly adapts to humans. Today, every supermarket door, every automatic sliding door in a hotel or airport is a mundane, barely noticed descendant of that fiction. We live in the casual future vision of the past. Even more impressive, perhaps, was the holodeck on the Enterprise, a room that could simulate any conceivable reality. A computer-generated world so perfect it was indistinguishable from reality. A place for training, recreation, and adventure. When the series aired, this was pure fantasy. Today, only a few decades later, we put on VR headsets and immerse ourselves in virtual worlds that, while not yet perfect, already provide a sense of immersion that was unimaginable back then. The idea of the holodeck has become the driving vision for an entire industry working to dissolve the boundaries between the real and the virtual. Or let's look to Germany, to the world of the longest-running science fiction series in the world, Perry Rhodan. As early as the first novels from 1961, there were the positronics, huge room-filling supercomputers that served as artificial brains. They could solve complex problems, analyze data, and communicate with humans. Although the idea of giant robot brains has been surpassed by today's miniaturization, the concept was astonishingly prescient. The series anticipated the idea of artificial intelligence and human-machine communication long before it became a common topic. The positronic was a reliable advisor, a computational genius, and a repository of knowledge far beyond human capacity. Exactly what modern AI systems are beginning to achieve today. These examples show us that exponential development often begins in the mind. Imagination is the test run for the possible. But the gap between fiction and reality, between the idea and its implementation, is getting shorter and shorter. The dream becomes a sketch, the sketch becomes a blueprint, and the blueprint becomes a reality, just waiting to be surpassed by the next generation of dreamers and engineers. Science fiction is not just entertainment. It is a catalyst for progress, a crucible of ideas that continually pushes the boundaries of what we believe is possible. Chapter 5: The Unleashing of Energy, the Power of Civilization. The unquenchable thirst of the industrial and digital revolutions was a thirst for energy. The steam engine had unleashed the power of coal, but the acceleration demanded new, more powerful, and more reliable sources to keep the lights of civilization burning and to fuel the relentless march of progress. In the 20th century, humanity learned to tap into the fundamental forces of the universe itself and to emancipate itself from fossil fuels. The journey began with the power of water. All over the world, massive dams were built, monuments of concrete and steel that tamed entire rivers and created vast lakes. Imagine the sheer power of the Hoover Dam in the USA or the Three Gorges Dam in China, structures of epic proportions. The water, dammed for miles behind these walls, is channeled through giant turbines to drive massive generators. It is the conversion of the potential energy of the dammed water into clean, continuous electricity for the growing cities and industries. An impressive display of engineering that forever changed the landscape and brought prosperity and light to entire regions. At the same time, we learned to capture the invisible power of the wind, no longer just with the sails of ships, but with elegant giant wind turbines that turn slowly and majestically on the horizon. Entire parks of these white giants are emerging on coasts and plains, converting the gentle but steady movement of air into electrical energy. These modern wind turbines, with their complex rotor blades designed to optimally capture wind energy, are an example of the constant race to maximize the efficiency and availability of energy. And we learn to harness the light of the sun itself, the ultimate energy source that makes life on Earth possible in the first place. Photovoltaics, the direct conversion of light into electricity, began as an extremely expensive technology for space travel to power satellites. Today, solar panels cover rooftops and entire stretches of desert, transforming sunlight into usable electrical energy. It is a silent, clean form of energy generation that can make us independent of fossil fuels. Silicon cells that, without moving parts, without noise or emissions, harvest the inexhaustible energy of the sun's rays to power our homes and devices. But the greatest and at the same time most terrifying leap in energy production came from decoding the atom itself. In the heart of matter, in the nucleus of atoms, humanity found an energy source of unimaginable density. Nuclear fission, which is controlled in nuclear power plants, releases from a small amount of uranium, an amount of energy that would require burning millions of tons of coal. It was a Faustian pact, an energy source of immense power that could make humanity independent of fossil fuels and meet the growing global demand, but which also brought with it new, previously unknown risks. The mastery of the atom was an ultimate testament to human intellect, and at the same time, a permanent reminder of our immense responsibility. Each new energy source was another multiplier for the acceleration, another step on the exponential ladder that carried us ever higher, elevating us to a new level of civilizational development. Chapter 6: The Digital Explosion. The Age of Information. We have now arrived in the final seconds before midnight. The 20th century. After the taming of electricity, the automobile, the airplane, the radio, and television follow in rapid succession. Then, around 1947, the invention of the transistor at Bell Labs, a tiny component made of semiconductor material like silicon, which acts as an electronic switch with no moving parts, reliable and small. But billions of them, arranged on a tiny microchip through photolithographic processes, become the brain of our modern world. The computing power that in the 1960s filled entire rooms to calculate the trajectory of the Apollo rockets to the moon is now found billions of times over in the smartphone in your pocket. Moore's Law, an observation by Intel co-founder Gordon Moore in 1965, states that the number of transistors on a chip doubles approximately every 2 years. This prediction became the relentless pacemaker of the digital age and is one of the most impressive exponential developments in history. The development that lasted for 5 decades and transformed the structure of the world from the economy to culture. Around the year 1990, the World Wide Web, built upon the older Internet, becomes accessible to the public. It is as if all the billions of new brains, the computers, are connected into a single global superbrain. The entire sum of human knowledge, collected over millennia in libraries and archives, becomes available to anyone with an internet connection, anytime, anywhere. Communication, which once took weeks to send a letter across the ocean, now happens in milliseconds via fiber optic cables and satellites. Social networks emerge, connecting billions of people and forever changing the way we make friends, receive information, and organize our society. The acceleration becomes an explosion, a digital supernova that permeates every aspect of our lives and catapults us into an era of unprecedented change. Progress, once measured in geological time, now happens from 1 year to the next, from 1 decade to the next. Chapter 7: The Now and the Near Tomorrow. Artificial Intelligence and New Horizons. And that brings us to the present moment, to the most recent, perhaps the last great revolution that we can still comprehend with our old way of thinking. Artificial intelligence. After decades of slow academic development in laboratories, AI has made a performance leap in recent years that has surprised even the most optimistic experts. We are the first generation of humans to have everyday, almost philosophical conversations with a non-human intelligence. The first generation that can tell a machine to paint a picture in the style of Van Gogh, compose a symphony in the style of Bach, or write complex computer code, and it does so in seconds. We no longer live in a time of rapid change. We live in a time of accelerating change. We are passengers on a train that is not just moving, but whose speed is increasing with every second. And while AI is already permeating our daily lives, the next revolutions are already at the door, not quite ready, but visible on the horizon. Autonomous driving, for example, a problem of incredible complexity. It's not just about keeping a car in its lane. It's about creating a machine that understands the chaotic, unpredictable world of human traffic in real time. A machine that can distinguish a child running after a ball into the street from a blowing plastic bag. A machine that must make moral decisions in fractions of a second. It is a technology that has the potential to save millions of lives, but also raises profound ethical questions and challenges our understanding of responsibility and control. At the same time, scientists are working on new, cleaner energy sources for the future, such as thorium reactors, a form of nuclear energy based on an abundant element that could potentially be safer and produce less long-lived nuclear waste than traditional uranium reactors. Thorium is 3 times more common than uranium, can be used in existing reactors, and produces less long-lived radioactive waste. It is a technology still in development, but it holds the promise of a sustainable energy future for the coming stages of civilization. We live in a fascinating intermediate world, where the problems of today are to be solved with the technologies of tomorrow, a world that is constantly reinventing itself. Chapter 8: The Dreams of Tomorrow, Unfinished Science Fiction Visions. But let us look even further for a moment beyond the near tomorrow, into the realms of science fiction that are still waiting to become reality. These are the great dreams that have fascinated humanity for generations and remind us how far the human imagination can reach. They are the unfulfilled promises that shape our vision of the future. There is, for example, beaming, the teleportation of matter, as seen countless times in Star Trek. The idea of no longer having to travel, but being disassembled into one's atomic components at one location, sent through space as a pure stream of information, and reassembled exactly at a distant destination. A leap from one planet to the next in seconds. It is the ultimate dream of overcoming space and distance. But it raises dizzying questions. Would the person arriving at the destination still be the same, or are they just a perfect copy, while the original ceased to exist during disassembly? What happens to consciousness on this unimaginable journey? The physical hurdles, like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which forbids the exact measurement of all particle positions and velocities simultaneously, are gigantic, but the philosophical ones are perhaps even greater, challenging our understanding of identity and soul. Or the dream of anti-gravity, the mastery of one of the most fundamental forces of the universe, which binds us firmly to the ground. Imagine a world freed from gravity, cities floating in the clouds, their foundations lost in the mist, vehicles gliding silently over the landscape without friction, without emissions, without engines, just by sheer will or a field, a form of movement as effortless as a thought. It would be the end of the tyranny of the vertical, a civilization that can unfold freely in 3 dimensions. It would be the ultimate mastery over the laws of physics as we know them, opening doors to ways of building and living that seem impossible today. And of course, faster-than-light space travel, the warp drive or hyperdrive. The realization that the universe is so unimaginably vast that even at the speed of light, a journey to the nearest stars would take centuries or millennia, is one of the greatest soberings of modern astronomy. Science fiction offers a way out. Bend space instead of traveling through it. Contract space in front of you and expand it behind you like an accordion. The starship itself would be in a bubble of normal space-time and would never move faster than light, but the bubble itself would traverse the universe at a speed that shatters all limits. A bold, almost magical idea, based on Einstein's theories yet going far beyond them, to carry humanity to the stars. Chapter 9: The Forgotten Worlds of Media, from Gramophone to Cloud. To make the breathtaking speed of technological progress even clearer, it is worth looking at areas that directly affect our daily lives, but which we often take for granted. Let's take the way we store and consume music. The journey is a metaphor for the dematerialization of technology. Imagine sitting in a late 19th century salon. A large wood-paneled box stands in the corner, the gramophone. You place a shellac record on it, put a needle in the groove, and music is produced mechanically. Then the record player with its vinyl records, a warm analog sound experience. The music is physical, tied to a large, fragile medium. A few decades later comes magnetic tape, then the audio cassette, a small plastic case containing a tape on which music is stored as analog or later digital magnetic information. Many young people today may have never held an audio cassette or tried to fix a tangled tape with a pencil. Then comes the CD, an optical storage of digital music, a leap into perfect noise-free playback. And only a few years later comes the MP3 file, music that suddenly has no physical form. Pure data that can be sent by email or packed onto a tiny memory stick. Today, we stream music from the cloud, an endless catalog of sounds that no longer belongs to us but is available on demand. From a physical object to an intangible stream. The same is true for computer data storage. It began with huge punch cards and room-filling magnetic tape drives, followed by clunky floppy disks of various sizes, from 8-inch to 3.5-inch, that could only store a few kilobytes. Then came CDs and DVDs as optical storage, followed by USB sticks and external hard drives that hold gigantic amounts of data. And today, we often no longer store our most important data physically with us, but in the cloud, on servers somewhere in the world, accessible at any time. The physical storage shrinks, becomes invisible, and then immaterial. This development shows us not only the acceleration, but also the dematerialization of technology. What was once a tangible, sometimes fragile object becomes an intangible data set, accessible from anywhere in the world. The smartphone we hold in our hands today is the best example. From the clunky brick Motorola Dynatac of the 80s to the first iPhone that sparked a revolution, to today's high-end devices that have more computing power than the Apollo moon rocket. Is this the end of this development, or is the smartphone itself just another cassette that will soon be replaced by augmented reality glasses, neural interfaces, or other as yet unimaginable technologies? Outro. The next heartbeat. The beauty of change. So what comes in the next second on our 24-hour clock? What happens after midnight? The ideas that were just science fiction are becoming the engineering projects of tomorrow. Direct connections between the brain and computers that will expand our world of thought and give us new forms of communication and access to knowledge. The decoding and editing of the human genome to eradicate hereditary diseases and overcome our biological limitations. A civilization that is slowly preparing to become an interplanetary species, not only inhabiting Earth but also establishing bases on Mars and mining resources from asteroids. But it is also interesting to look at the dreams of the past that have proven more stubborn than we thought. In the science fiction films of the 80s and 90s, the future was full of flying cars, hovering hoverboards and jetpacks. We are in the year 2024, and while we carry all of human knowledge in our pockets and talk to artificial intelligences, we still get stuck in traffic on our way to work while our neighbors might already be sitting in a self-driving car. Why is that? Perhaps because it is infinitely easier to master pure information than to overcome the hard laws of physics, energy, gravity, the safety of material objects, and the complex rules of coexisting in three-dimensional traffic spaces. The promise of the flying car shows us that progress is not a straight line. It leaps forward in areas where the hurdles are lowest. And the digital world of information was such a world with almost no friction. When we look back and consider the epical leaps of our development, the breathtaking acceleration of history becomes strikingly clear once again. From the first hand axes to the beginning of agriculture, we had to wait millions of years, an almost immeasurable period of silence. But from that agriculture to the invention of writing, only about 6,500 years passed. The next great leap, from the moment of writing to the revolutionary power of the printing press, spanned about 5,000 years. Then the rhythm noticeably accelerated. From the printing press to the sweat-inducing work of the steam engine, only 300 years passed. Another leap, from the age of the steam engine to the clean, invisible power of electricity, shrank to about 100 years. The speed increased even more. From the transistor, the heart of the digital age, to global networking through the internet, it took barely more than 40 years. The evolution of our communication mirrors this acceleration. From the clunky mobile phones of the early days to the first smartphone, about 25 years passed. And from the first smartphone to an artificial intelligence that can now convert text into videos of astonishing quality, it was only about 15 years. The intervals are shrinking dramatically, becoming a tiny breath in the great stream of time. We are approaching a point where the changes within a single generation, even within a decade, will reshape the world as profoundly as it once took millennia. We live in the fascinating time when the clock of progress is ticking ever faster. Some believe we are approaching a technological singularity, a point at which progress becomes so rapid that it is no longer predictable for us. A moment when one artificial intelligence invents the next, even smarter AI, in an endless loop of self-improvement. But we need not fear this future. We can view it with curiosity and awe. If the world changes more in a single human lifetime than in the 100,000 years before it, what does that mean for us? Are we just passive spectators of this incredible acceleration? Or are we perhaps its meaning and purpose? This question has no answer yet. But it invites us to look at our own existence with a sense of wonder, at this tiny fleeting second on the clock of time in which we have the privilege to live, to think, and to dream. Sleep well and dream of the future that has only just begun.